Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Fu, and I'm the staff liaison to GFOA's Women's Public Finance Network, or WPFN. Established in 1990, WPFN was formed within GFOA as a network of women GFOA members to coordinate communication and encourage participation in association and in the group. WPFN has evolved and currently provides education, networking, and mentoring opportunities to advance the careers of women public finance professionals. Today's webinar, Lead in the Renewed Age of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, is sponsored by WPFN and aligns with the group's theme this year of the Resilient Woman Finance Officer. Before we begin today's webinar, I want to make two housekeeping announcements. First, this session is worth 1 continuing professional education credit. At the conclusion of the webinar, I will provide the CPE verification code to validate your attendance today. And second, I want to bring your attention to the Q&A below. At the end of the session, we will take questions and answers. Please use that function at the bottom to submit questions to the panelists. Now I would like to introduce today's moderator, Mia Carrell Brown, Senior Relationship Manager at Chandler Asset Management. Mia focuses on development of client relationships in the public sector and on coordinating customized services related to best investment practices for clients in Southern California. Mia, I turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And hello, everyone. We'd like to begin by thanking all of our attendees for joining us today for this important discussion. And a warm set of thanks to the GFOA and to the Public Finance Network for hosting this webinar. Again, I'm Mia Carrell Brown. I'm a Senior Relationship Manager at Chandler Asset Management, and I've been a member of the GFOA for at least the last dozen years. Today, I'll serve as moderator for the discussion, Leading in the Renewed Age of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And we are joined by 3 esteemed panelists who are truly experts in their areas of focus. Our first panelist is Mrs. Lisa Marie Harris, and Lisa Marie is Finance Director and Treasurer at San Diego County Water Authority. She is also a longtime member of the GFOA, and we were speaking earlier, we think for at least the last 15 years. So a warm welcome to Lisa Marie. We also have our subject matter expert, Dr. Hei-ock, pronounced Hei-ock, who is the Executive Director and founder for the Kim Center for Social Balance. And then last but not least, we have our elected official, Mr. Dan McAllister, who is Treasurer and Tax Collector for the County of San Diego. So before jumping right in, the pandemic has really changed a lot of the ways that we entertain ourselves. And one of the things that many of us find ourselves doing in the evenings after we wrap up our important budget work or infrastructure deals is binging on television series or different series on cable television. So Lisa Marie, when you're not working on rate studies or infrastructure projects, what television series do you find yourself enthralled in?
Well, I just completed a series called Lovecraft Country, which is featured on HBO. And it's really an amazing story following 2 African-American families in the 1950s in Chicago, which is what at the time was at the height of Jim Crow, a height of lynching and just very much horrific experiences for the family. But it's juxtaposed with horror because you got Jordan Peele, who's an executive director, and then you have J.J. Abrams, which is a science-fi writer. And so they tell very factual events like the Tulsa Massacre or the murder of Emmett Till, the young boy who was murdered brutally for looking at a white woman. But then from that history, they weave in magic and horror and sci-fi, which makes it just an amazing, interesting story that I would encourage all of you all to watch. And what's been interesting, an interesting phenomenon from this pandemic is that there has been a need from the African-American experience to want to gravitate towards sci-fi. Why? Because it's future and it's something that we can look towards in a very positive, hopeful way. Because what I also found is Octavia Butler, my most favorite sci-fi author, in the 90s had many accolades from the Hugo Award, the Nobel Award, but never was a New York Best Time seller until this year. So she became on the list from a book she wrote in the 90s. And so clearly Lovecraft Country, along with science fiction, has really fulfilled a need of the African American experience. But then it also allows for dialogue. I was just watching the director from the show, and she said it really gives organizations an opportunity to share in a TV show and then begin this dialogue. And that's what this is all about. Diversity, inclusion begins first with a conversation, which is what we're going to have today.
Thank you, Lisa Marie. I'm hearing from the audience, and there are definitely fans of the series. Will you please say the name one more time?
Oh, Lovecraft Country.
Lovecraft Country. And where does it air?
On HBO.
On HBO. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Kim, shifting over to you when you're not writing grants and doing your important work on gender studies, what show, if you have any time in the evening at all, find yourself interested in watching?
Well, since I do live the gender and racial equity mission day in, day out, as you said, my evening binges are a lot lighter. I'm binging the British baking show, Great British Baking Show, and Star Trek Discovery, but I can't turn my head off, and I'm intrigued by the diversity that I see in both of those shows. I've been following the issue of gender and racial equity and ethnicity equity in media for quite some time, and I'm really enjoying the progression that I see in who's represented and how they're represented in these shows.
I'm glad to hear that. I also enjoy baking. Now I'm curious, have you tried any of the recipes, or have you found that you're more interested in cooking as a result?
Yeah, definitely. Lots of tips. As a matter of fact, yesterday I created I made a mayonnaise, and it split and it curdled.
Oh no.
Which I wouldn't have known how to describe had I not been watching this show.
Well, that's fantastic. It's entertaining. A little bit of something different. Dan, if we may ping you, my understanding is that you're not a huge series fan, but there is one area that you really like to focus in on and watch. And can you please share with our audience what it is that you like to watch on television?
I can, and thank you for the time. I feel so strongly about the news because we live it, we watch it, and we need it every day. I'm a news addict. I'm a button pusher by nature. I'm a channel flipper and a channel changer on a regular basis. But I need to get that information hit every day in finance, the political landscape, COVID, life in our country in general, and what's going on in our America. And the best way I know to do that is to tune into the news, plural, on a regular basis. I also love documentaries, and some of those that have been produced by PBS, CNN, any number of the networks have done just a masterful job of bringing facts and figures and really kind of painting the picture of what it is they're trying to say. And lastly, I think that it's fascinating to me to watch the change that is gradually occurring on many, many news stations throughout our country in the interest of practical diversity, because people have started to recognize and realize the value of a diverse presenter group, because that's the makeup of our society these days. We are a very diverse country. We are very diverse when it comes to racial and ethnic and all of those interests. And it's very important to me to see this change occurring. Sometimes not fast enough, but I think that's one area where actually the rating services speak louder than sometimes the actions of some stations. And they force diversity to happen because people know that they suffer ratings problems if they don't. They have to reach out, and that's the kind of thing we want to instill. And I'm very proud to talk about that because it does make a difference every day of our lives, what happens in the news.
Well, Dan, thank you for sharing, and certainly you're extremely well informed, and we look forward to hearing more from you today on our panel. So I'd like to start by reading an introduction and sharing with you how we arrived at sharing this important topic with our attendees today. So following the death of George Floyd in May, we saw protests across the nation really calling for an end to police brutality. And as we move forward and start to heal as a nation, the result of these protests have really been an increase in demand for discussions about equity, inclusion, and diversity in communities really across our country. And as women and government employees, we use our voices, our shared experiences, and we truly set the bar really high. And so as we embark on this illuminating discussion today to lead in the renewed age of equity and inclusion, our goal is to promote growth and really enhance awareness about the values and advantages of inclusive workplaces. So fostering equity, diversity, and inclusion is truly an active process. And we as a panel, really as a nation, we acknowledge that we are still learning. So let's go ahead and set up the learning objectives for today's session and start there on slide 2. So our hope by the end of this discussion is that we'll be able to view diversity and inclusion as a shared priority and know that it affects us all. It's not just for human resources. And then of course, utilize the lens of diversity and guide for interactions with colleagues. So as finance directors and finance managers, we create the budgets that really are the operating framework for our agencies. And as these employees, we are interacting with multiple departments. And so we hope that we'll be able to utilize this training as general best practice for conversations within your agencies. So we can go ahead to the next slide. And I'd like to set up our first poll question. So for our first poll question, how do diversity, equity, and inclusion most apply in the workforce? Select all that apply, and there's no right or wrong answer. This is just multiple choice. And we'll give our participants about 30 seconds to answer. Are we seeing responses yet from the first poll question, Elizabeth? Yes, we are. Great. So 82% of you said that employees feel heard, accepted, and valued, and that's fantastic. 92% of you shared that employees feel accepted and valued, they are happier and more productive. That's really wonderful. And employees tend to stay longer and contribute thoughts and ideas, resulting in lower turnover rates. Well, you are definitely a very observant audience, so thank you for your participation in that first poll question. So let's go ahead and move on, and I'm going to direct my first question today to Dan McAllister. Dan, as our elected official, please share with us some of your responsibilities in your role as County Treasurer. And how do you foster diversity and inclusion in the Treasurer and Tax Collector's office?
Well, thank you. Again, our office is an elected position. My office is an elected position. We have 123 employees in the Treasurer Tax Collector's office in San Diego County. We have 5 different office locations. We manage an investment pool topping $12 billion annually. And this year we expect to collect over $7 billion in property taxes throughout San Diego County. I should add that the investment pool, if you will, the investment pool of the County of San Diego services about 210 different public agencies, and we serve as their bank. And it's a very simple, straightforward proposition. We work very hard to accommodate their needs and their interests, and participating in things like this seminar today is just one of those. I think that to answer your second question about how do we foster diversity and inclusion in the Treasurer Tax Collector's Office, it's a story. It's a small story, it's a short story, but it's a poignant story, I think. And that is that for diversity and inclusion to occur, you have to believe in your heart that is the right thing to do, and then use your head to get it done and to do it. In our case, this goes way back to when I was first elected, and I was asked the simple question by a department head who had been there for years and told me that in 3 months in office, he had observed that our diversity efforts were well afoot, and we were making incredible progress, maybe unlike any other department in the county. And he said, "How do you do it?" And I said, "How do you do what?" And he said, "How do you do this diversity thing?" Very, very interesting question coming. And I really hadn't thought about it. I hadn't thought too much about it, except that I do what is natural, and what comes natural to me is that we have to serve our constituencies. And if we don't talk like them, walk like them, act like them, and intersperse our work with them, and we do that through speaking 17 different languages, I should add, we don't have hope for diversity. But since we do those things, and since we go out of our way to make good things happen in that area, we specifically recruit people who are underrepresented in many cases in these government jobs. That is our job, that is our duty, and that is what we set out there to do on a regular basis. And I must tell you, the camaraderie and the sharing and the solution making and the solutions that they come up with because of the diversity in nature that they are, it really does help us a lot.
Well, Dan, thank you for that. And we have some statistics on the next slide that really shows what your population looks like. So would you say that as demographics within San Diego County shifted, that drove your desire to staff better to accommodate your constituency? And as you mentioned early on, that this began kind of early in your first term as treasurer. How did you really know where to begin?
Well, I think that we were helped by a system, for instance, that honors retirements. And as people would retire and we would recruit, we would go out of our way to reach into pockets of different people, different than existed in that time frame for our office, and recruit them. And I think you can see from those numbers, we've been very successful at bringing to the fore talent that otherwise would have not been brought forward. And I'm very proud of that, because the numbers speak for themselves. And we need to be, as I said, diverse in every way in our workforces, because that's the way we can craft the best solutions to problems that we face.
That's really fantastic. And Dan, just a follow-up comment, if you will, I've heard you state in the past that because your Treasurer Tax Collector's Office is so widely representative of the constituency in the County of San Diego, you have a fantastic collection rate when it comes to property tax. Isn't that correct?
It is correct. And I will tell you that until this year, with the endemic coming upon us, our rates for the last 6 years in a row were over 99% in the collection realm. This year we dipped a little below that, and we came in at 98.6%, but still very high compared to other counties throughout the state. There are 58 counties in California, by the way, and probably many around the country. These are enviable numbers, and we're very proud of them. And I think it's a testimony to the diversity and the wherewithal and the stick-to-itiveness of our workforce. They do a great job, and I can't say enough good about them.
Well, thank you for your good work, Dan. I really appreciate that as a resident myself of the County of San Diego. So Lisa Marie, I'd like to shift toward you if I may. You've held a wide range of managerial level positions in high-profile public agencies throughout the state of California, including working alongside Dan McAllister as Deputy Treasurer of the County of San Diego. What would you say that you've learned along the way, and what advice can you offer to other finance directors and treasurers across the country?
Sure, thank you, Mia. I think one of the most critical things that I've learned along the way, and I would share as advice, is that you have to develop a high level of competency and a high level of integrity as you pursue your career in public finance. I started my career, my really biggest, when I broke the glass ceiling was when I was Assistant Deputy Airport for the San Francisco International Airport. And in that capacity, I was responsible for basically issuing around $2 billion in debt to build the new international terminal at the time. Of course, it's not new now. But from that experience, I really knew that in order to have that level of financial responsibility, that I needed to continue to have an ongoing commitment to learning about finance and learning the skill sets in finance. And so I made sure that I continually participated in GFOA, CMTA, the Bond Buyers Annual California Conference. I mean, I can't underscore the need to continually develop your skill set. And especially if you want to go beyond being a budget manager, then figure out how do you expand your financial level of experience. Because in order to be a finance director, even especially at a small city, you need to have a level of debt experience, investment experience, auditing, payroll, accounts payable. Now that I work at a water agency, I have to also set rates and charges annually. And that was a new skill set I actually had to inherit after 7 years working at the Water Authority. But I would also encourage that the same thought about yourself, you need to instill in your staff. It's critical that you hire very competent and high integrity staff, and that you help them instill a need for ongoing training and development. And because I make sure all my employees have at least one membership, if not more than one. We're all members of GFOA, CMTA, CSFMO, for example. I also encourage them to develop, to obtain certifications. I know CSFMO was working with GFOA to increase their certification. I just hired a manager who only had budget experience, but I gave her the investment experience. And I told her, I need you to get that CMTA certification. And so it also builds their career and it builds their opportunity. They know I trust them and they trust me. But I would say among advice, you want to have competency and you want to have integrity.
Thank you, Lisa Marie. Those are all great skill sets to have, but also to really share with your staff members. And I think the days of thinking that finance managers or budget officers or finance directors are sitting behind a computer all day are really kind of myths of the past, because you are presenting big numbers, you're meeting with investment makers. So having a strong, competent staff and being well informed is extremely critical. So for our next question, a follow-up, if you will, what are your thoughts about diversity and inclusion in the finance departments and organizations where you've held managerial roles?
Sure. So I'm certainly not a diversity and inclusion expert, and I know there's folks that hold those titles, but I will say that it's always been an advantage for me and my team that we're diverse, not only in our skill set, but the male-female mix, the cultural mix. I have 2 or 3 different people from different countries that I've hired over the years, and it's really just great to collaborate and bring synergy. And from the diverse staff and the diverse skill set, we have created amazing success throughout my career. I mean, this year in particular with the pandemic, we really had to bring our best selves to work so that we can tackle just significant challenges. Water agencies have been told by the state regulators that we cannot shut water off. And so we had to figure out how do we eat those costs and still deliver an essential water service. And that really hit our financials. And so me and my team had to think strategically and creatively as we try to still make financial ends meet. And it really meant bringing our best selves to work. And I think really that's what diversity and inclusion is. If you feel included in an organization, then you can bring your best self and you can bring your best talent. And quite frankly, as a result of the civil unrest and the death of George Floyd, we at the Water Authority have taken seriously, well, what does diversity and inclusion mean for us? And we're now beginning those conversations.
Well, thank you for those wise words, Lisa Marie. So we're going to go ahead and move forward and discuss very briefly the elements of workforce diversity. Now, the WHO Health Organization, the World Health Organization, we've heard a lot about them through this pandemic, states that we spend about a third of our adult lives at work. Well, truly, when they created that statistic or went out and conducted their research, they were not necessarily thinking about finance professionals, because I, speaking as one, can say that we probably spend more like half of our adult lives at work as finance professionals. But nonetheless, when we're thinking about our workplaces and what they were like when we were all working under one roof, there are many elements that go into workforce diversity. The first being gender. And from our time of birth and when we are sent home from the hospital, we're either wrapped in a pink or blue blanket. And I believe that that really sends a very strong message to the world. We also comprise many different races and ethnicities. In fact, look at our panelists today. We are all from very different backgrounds coming together to speak about one topic. And certainly age. If you think about our workplaces today, we have multiple generations, Gen X, Gen Z, Millennials, and baby boomers all working under one roof. And certainly employees of different physical abilities, different educational levels. You may have a management analyst who has an AA or BA degree, and then you have a CFO who might be pursuing a doctorate level of education. And then we have members of the LGBTQ communities. And then there are other considerations for us to just to kind of think about, because they do come into play. We have political affiliations, and having come off a recent presidential election, one of the things that we really saw is that we are a country truly divided. And so people have varying degrees of political affiliations. And then folks from different socioeconomic and income backgrounds. And then finally, different religions. And when I think about all of these elements of workforce diversity, quite frankly, it leads me back to thinking about some of our GFOA conferences and how unique and really incredible we are when we're at those conferences in those big convention centers, and we see people from different states, folks from different countries, all coming together to share ideas and to innovate and to share our skills. I think that wonderful things happen at those GFOA conferences. And so I don't want us to forget what that really feels like when we have that much synergy in the room. So let's go ahead and go to our next poll question. Are you comfortable discussing your background and cultural experiences with your colleagues? Again, no right or wrong answer, it's multiple choice. And those choices are yes, no, in progress, or unsure. And we'll go ahead and give you about 30 seconds to respond. And we should start to see those responses coming back to us. And an overwhelmingly 75% of you said, yes, you do feel comfortable discussing your background and cultural experiences with your colleagues. That's really fantastic. Only 8% of you said no. 12% are in progress and 6% are unsure. So this is a wonderful place to be as we have these discussions, because there is a little bit of room to make change and to start to understand what workforce diversity really looks like. So thank you for participating. The next question, I'd like to focus on gender for a moment, and I'd like to go over to our subject matter expert, Dr. Kim. Can you please provide some insight on the important work and research that you're conducting through your nonprofit, the Kim Center for Social Balance, and how you're engaging public agencies as well as the state of California on the importance of gender equality and equity in the workplace?
Thank you, Mia. Yes, the Kim Center has launched one of the most aggressive efforts in the country to accelerate the achievement of equal status for all genders and races and ethnicities in the workplace. Our signature Gender Leap initiative is based on two principles that are essential for widespread cultural transformation. The first is locally organized action, and the second is standardized progress metrics. Gender Leap comprises three tools. We have, when combined, these tools give employers the data, structure, and the support that they've been lacking through the decades to make rapid cultural transformation. We have a comprehensive assessment as our first tool, which reveals cultural and logistical equity barriers for employees at multiple intersections. And this includes, in addition to race and ethnicity, it's also sexual orientation, disability or veteran status, et cetera. And we combine company stats with employee feedback. Our second tool is a customizable playbook. And this coordinates and clearly lays out goals and roles and timelines for all stakeholder groups. And that's everyone from leaders to employees to perhaps shareholders or customers, depending on the nature of the organization. And then the last tool, and this is a fully integrated initiative, is our accreditation. And it's a national set of metrics that holds all organizations across sectors, industries, and regions to the same set of standards. So no matter where you are, no matter who you are, you know when you're reliably able to identify a company or an organization that is moving the needle. We're working with San Diego County, cities, and employers right now to scale Gender Leap to the regional level so that we can prove that a community can make measurable progress toward gender equity when organized and united. It's a beautiful thing, and we look forward to the day when every region in the country is doing the same thing. We've also spearheaded Workplace Gender Equity Day for the first time in history. It's a public statement for municipalities to unite their constituencies around cultural transformation. And so far we have adoptees including the state of California, 8 cities, the City of San Diego Human Relations Commission, and soon will be the County of San Diego. We're also speaking with a few cities about adopting our accreditation as part of their procurement criteria, like women-owned business, federal contracting.
That's fantastic, and it's wonderful to hear that you have buy-in from both the private and public sector. Yes. If I may, just a follow-up question, how has Gender Leap clarified your priorities and improved efficiency for some of your clients?
Thanks for asking. This is the exciting part of our work. The assessment helps our clients sharpen their focus by identifying the specific barriers that exist within their companies, organizations, or regions. And in this way, they're relieved from throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks. For example, one of our human resources clients assumed that their minority male staff was going to need significant attention. But when we cross-referenced the advancement and compensation data from their assessment with their employee feedback, we found that women of color are still experiencing the greatest barriers to the pipeline. So now this client knows where to focus their energies instead of just guessing. And we have another client who is particularly forward-thinking in hiring us to look deeper than their two-dimensional data, because their pay and overall representation showed in the aggregate that women and men, for example, are pretty equal. But through the employee engagement survey part of the assessment, we found that there's a significant difference in the perception of gender inequity between women and men, for example. And it was as big as 20%, which is very significant. It's a critical issue because, well, first of all, now they know they still have work to do in gender equity. And again, we applaud them for taking that step. And also, cultural transformation requires buy-in from all stakeholder groups. As I mentioned with the playbook, leaders and employees of all genders and all races and ethnicities, et cetera, need to know that they have a part in the efforts, and that their benefits are spelled out.
Thank you for conducting that important research and working again with both the public and private sector. Your insights are very important, and we look forward to hearing more about the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
In San Diego County. So let's go ahead and focus on the component of age for a moment, if you will. We're going to go back to the dimensions of diversity, and let's talk about Millennials and Gen Z for a moment. According to the Pew Research Center, Millennials are those individuals born between 1981 and 1996, and Gen Z was born between 1996 and 2010, and a lot of us are parents to Gen Z children. Both generations will soon comprise the majority of the workforce. They change jobs more often, which is costly to employers, yet they care about social issues and are committed to helping society improve. So my targets say, wow, they might make great government employees someday. We've also learned that Gen Z has been raised with the internet and social media, and they are 10 times more ethnically and racially diverse than baby boomers. So for my next question, I'm going to ask each of you to comment on how do you motivate different generations of employees, specifically these younger generations, in this app economy? And Lisa Marie, I'd like to start with you, if I may. I understand that the San Diego County Water Authority recently conducted an employee engagement survey. What did you hear back from those younger groups of employees?
Sure, thank you, Mia. Just to give some general background about the Water Authority, we are a wholesale water agency, and so our primary goal is to deliver water to the region, and we do so by delivering it to 26 member agencies. We're governed by a 36-member board, and we basically serve water to 3.3 million individuals. And we do so by importing 74% of that water actually from up north. And we do so through 300 miles of pipe. So we're a very infrastructure-driven organization. We also have dams. That's one of the pictures behind me. We also built one of the largest desal plants in the Western Hemisphere. And we do that with only 256 employees, believe it or not. So we're not a large population, but we are a very strong, unique population that serves the Water Authority. And we recently appointed, or the board appointed, a new general manager under the leadership of Sandy Carrell after serving under Maureen Stapleton for over 20 years, that she felt it was time to have a cultural shift in the organization. And the best way to do that from her perspective was to engage the employees in a survey to see where the culture is and where we want the culture to be. And what we found in the survey, especially for the younger generation, they didn't like the dress code. And you know, in government, we have to dress in a business manner. We're not Google, but that's something that they would prefer. They want more flexible hours, where maybe they come in for 4 hours, gone for 2 hours, and come back for 4. Again, that's not the structure of a governmental agency, but it was still something that we could hear. And then, of course, they talked a lot about working from home, which, believe it or not, we were not going to do. But now, given the pandemic, look what we're doing. And because of the pandemic, we at least now, the older generation, because I'm more of the Gen X, I guess.
Gen X, yes. Like
and a lot of the leadership are baby boomers. They couldn't believe that we could be a productive workforce working from home. But this pandemic has at least offered that we can make this happen. Maybe we won't be 24/7 at home. We get back to normal, but it certainly has encouraged all of us really, that we can think about working differently, and maybe working from home is a doable option.
That's really interesting. And I know for us as well, one of the things that we do find ourselves doing is leaning on the millennials and the Gen Z employees for their technological knowledge. And it really is almost intuitive for them. And they've been great contributors to this environment. And here we are, all working remote, as you mentioned, throughout this pandemic. Dan, my understanding is that the County of San Diego, you have a very rich student worker program and that you highly value internships. Can you share with our audience today what it is that you do at the County of San Diego with those student worker programs and interns?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think that it's important to note, and we have already, but reiterate, that each generation has its own set of motivations. And it's interesting to us that we have seen these up and coming generation products teaching the older employees by example. Because if you look at student workers in college, they are used to more diversity, more inclusiveness, and more togetherness in terms of making decisions and participating. And it's really a normal thing. However, that isn't so on the upper end of the hiring realm. And what we have found is that by hiring student workers, not only are they good examples to other generations older than they are, but most important, they can learn the skills necessary to work for us down the road when they graduate from college. And so we have been able to successfully go to college campuses. We are in the community. We talk to people in churches and different community organizations about students who are looking to work and students who want to work. And we are not afraid to step up and hire them. And that has enabled us to add to that 17 number of languages we communicate in very well. And many times these are the students, these are the children of new residents in San Diego, as well as California and our great country. But they come from different backgrounds. They have different values. And these are all positive contributions that these young people make to our workforce. And by holding our regular meetings at least 6 times a year with all staff present, it integrates the student workers, and we recognize them at those meetings. But we also add in to those meetings educational components, which always addresses some aspect of diversity and inclusion. It's very important to us. And these students have begun to make a difference. And we have been able to place students in good law schools. We've helped them get jobs outside of the county once they finish their work as students. And I'm very proud of that track record because it means that we're educating a workforce not only on the principles of work, but more important, where our discussion is today, on the benefits of good decision-making resulting from diversity and inclusion.
That's tremendous, Dan. Thank you for sharing. And it sounds like you're preparing that younger generation for the workforce. And I'm sure that in a few years, we will start to see those those youth show up at GFOA conferences, and we look forward to those interactions. Dr. Kim, can you share with us how gender is viewed amongst millennials and Gen Z individuals?
You know, Mia, I find that this data is fascinating and increasingly becoming more so. They are an unusual set of generations. And I agree with Dan that their contributions to the workplace are really valuable. They really believe that they can have it all, and that redefining the meaning of gender is a big part of that. More than 2/3 of people ages 14 to 34 say that gender no longer defines their destiny or should define their behavior. And this is funny, neither women nor men seem particularly interested in getting promoted to boss. Although it is more common among women, it's still only 34% women versus 24% men. And this was a Harvard study that was done recently. Granted, it's a, it's a study, but I found it intriguing. They're especially not interested in repeating the patterns of their parents, meaning the frenetic lifestyles of trying to have it all. So they're looking for better balance between work, career, family. They're rethinking the concept of masculinity. They are, the men are taking paternity leave and placing greater open value on being with their families and their caregiving responsibilities. Their men are more seriously considering moving into professions typically ascribed to women, which is a great balancing move as long as the pay stays balanced as well, because there are examples of professions where when men start to move in, for example, nursing, you develop a new pay gap. But let's hope that doesn't happen. And overall, there's seeking better balance, as I said, between women and men in caregiving responsibilities. In this study, 2/3 of millennials still recognize that it's easier for men to get ahead and believe that that needs to change. So that's definitely a great sign. Word to the wise for employers, they're noticing when diversity promises are not being kept. So over half of the millennials who were surveyed said that companies are only paying lip service to their diversity and equal opportunity goals. On the flip side, that means that they do notice when the intention is real. So that's when they stay, which is one of the tangible benefits, and are more productive, which are two of the tangible benefits of workplace equity that I know Dan will touch on later.
Thank you for sharing. We did have a panelist ask if you might be able to share that Harvard study link, either following the presentation or maybe somehow find that information and share it with Elizabeth so that she can share it with our attendees. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. So let's go ahead and move to slide 6. And I'd like to focus for a moment on leadership. Dan, we know that leaders have the most power to implement change in an organization. And you definitely serve as a role model and leader at the County of San Diego. Why would you say that leaders are so critical for the successful adoption of diversity and inclusion practices?
Well, I think it's a great question, because I think that we have to assume that not everybody wants to be a leader, not everybody is a leader, but there are enough people out there who are leaders. This is where I would take exception with the Harvard study a little bit, because almost every young person we interview for student worker jobs tell us that in 5 to 10 years, they want to be in charge. They want to be a manager. They want to be moving up the ladder of success. They don't hold back, and they're not shy about telling us those things. So I think that's kind of an interesting difference between the Harvard study results and what we find in an informal way. But I think that leaders play a critical role by setting the tone and the example, and by valuing differences, identifying talent, and developing relationships is what, in our eyes, it is all about. And in my case, I would rather wait 6 months to find the right person to help us forward these goals and others than to just rush out and hire the first person that comes through the door. Because I want them to share the value of diversity. I want them to share the value of inclusion. I want them to share the understanding of the benefits to pushing for a more together workforce. And it seems to be working in our case, and we're very proud of that progress. I think another couple of things that are very important here
Mhm.
is that it's important to know who's in the room. So it's equally as important to make note of who's not in the room when issues such as diversity and inclusion are discussed. Because when people are left out of the process, it doesn't help the process along. Everybody needs to be in the room, and everybody needs to be part of the process that creates an environment for change. So leaders do play a critical role in change. There's no question about that. We know as an outcome, better decisions occur, better business outcomes occur, and better, stronger workforces occur by integrating these basic principles of inclusion and diversity.
Well, you've definitely done a fantastic job creating a vision for your agency. And we know that you encourage really high levels of engagement. So thank you for doing that, Dan.
Let me add one more. Let me add one more
Yes,
note,
of
and that
course,
is that
please.
this is not a singular Dan effort. This would not be possible were it not for the outstanding staff we have and the team we have put together over years of working to make these good things happen. So it's a team effort. It's not one individual. It's a team effort of leadership that gets it done.
And Dan, you have affinity groups at the County of San Diego as well. Your employees are very involved in diversity and inclusion in their own right. And we think that's really fantastic that the county really fosters that environment for them.
I think the county has come a long way, and that which I talked about early in my career at the county and now are two different worlds. There is, you're right, a recognition and embracing of diversity and inclusion, and it's on its way to becoming a national role model, I think. It's good. It's good.
Well,
And Mia, can I just
yes, please do.
I just wanted to interject for a moment. I think it's great that Dan pointed out that his team speaks to the people that they recruit and the younger generations. And that definitely bears out what I was saying earlier about the importance of finding out what's going on in your organization, your own organization and your own region. And like Lisa Marie was saying, they've done an internal survey as well, because you can only go so far with national, global statistics, and those are done on one study group. So I think that illustrates the point perfectly.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. Lisa Marie, what would you say are the significant barriers really standing in the way of leaders who want to incorporate D&I principles?
I think there are a number of things. I mean, it's certainly hiring practices. Many governmental agencies were limited to a job announcement that may be too rigid or not structured, too structured. Then we're given 2 weeks to publish it. And then we just have to wait to see who comes and shows up. And that pool of folks may not be diverse at all. And then so we're limited only to what we can get. And so we definitely need to change our hiring practices. I think there's fear. There's always fear and change. That's a disadvantage. Organizational culture. And I'll say as a result of the employee engagement survey that we conducted at the Water Authority, each department was then charged with, well, on the deficient areas of the survey, what areas do we want to promote and take an initiative? In my finance department, one of the outcomes of the survey was to have a diversity inclusion committee just within my department. And it sparked actually a whole Water Authority wide effort, because the diversity and inclusion was not the initial purpose. The purpose was to have employee engagement, but we found that diversity and inclusion is a part of employee engagement. And one of the first things we promoted in my department, we had a committee of 4, and the way they started the whole process without a consultant, they decided that one way to take a step forward was for them to learn about each other and share their past experiences with the department. And so we had one member of the team who's recently immigrated from Poland. We had another member of the team who was actually born in Nigeria, but got a degree here in the United States. There was another employee, she's biracial, African American, and also Native American. Her family's from a tribal nation back east. No, and of course, none of us knew all these things.
Mhm.
And then the other employee was from the Philippines, but before she came to the Philippines, she spent time in Austria. And so it was just fascinating. I can say these details because each of them had a PowerPoint slide, and we all began to learn a better who they were. And then they rolled it out to the whole water authority. And then people realized we really don't know who we work with. And that's a beginning discussion and conversation for diversity and inclusion. And the way that it was rolled out, it was so welcoming, because sometimes people think diversity is to separate us or to make one group feel guilty or not. And it's not, it's just about learning who we are and being able to bring our best self, our authentic self. I know that's a term that's being used a lot, but that's the process. And it's just being open to begin that process that can break down those barriers.
Well, what you describe is extremely impactful, and reaching across those lines really leads to increased communication, and that level of comfort that you've been able to foster and create at the Water Authority will definitely lead to employee longevity, because people will feel so comfortable and so committed to your agency that they will want to stay. They'll be truly invested, if you will.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
If I can add, even like during, we had a Halloween happy hour just virtually, and we ended up talking about the horror movies that we liked. I mean, it was just fascinating learning about our peers. And so there's a number of ways to learn about each member of your team, and then you can grow and build your team stronger by knowing all the factors about them that they feel comfortable sharing.
That's really amazing. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to go ahead and move to the next slide, please. And let's focus for a moment a bit on recruiting. So how do you recruit and cultivate a diverse workforce? We also know that there is an awareness of the different dimensions of diversity. And also we are being affected very greatly as finance officers. And we see this often within the GFOA by the silver tsunami, which is the retirement of the baby boomers who have so much knowledge and so much institutional awareness of their agencies. So Dan, if we could focus on you for a bit, what is it that the County of San Diego does with regard to recruiting?
Well, I think that it's a mixed situation in essence. Many of the offices that are run by elected officials will work through the HR department of the county to actually do its recruiting for key positions. These might be unclassified positions, if you will, for the most part. So it's a limited number on each staff of each elected official. But what we have found is that sometimes it's important to hold out and wait for the right candidate, as opposed to just rushing to judgment and hiring somebody that you may have some doubts about and later regrets about. It's much easier to hire the right person and take a little extra time than it is to rush the process and end up with the wrong mix. Another thing that I think is important is expanding applicant outreach efforts. The traditional way of putting a job announcement online, calling it a day, and then responding to just those people who respond, I think is long gone. And I think in order to find the top-notch recruits and the best recruits, we need to reach further out. We need to look at social media. We need to look at affiliation groups. We need to look at other organizations in the communities, different associations, networking groups, churches, community groups who really do speak on behalf of the wide-ranging populace of San Diego County in particular. We need to promote our agency, utilize our agency's website to demonstrate kind of an inclusive workforce because there's a subliminal message that's sent by pictures, and people see and can understand better who it is we are when they see such pictures of a mixed workforce that is very productive and doing great things. I think one other example that I think is kind of intriguing and was kind of bizarre to me, it was sort of the Simpson-esque way of dealing with new news, and that was what our kids would say if something went wrong and they figured it out. And it took me a while to figure this out, but I recall a recruitment about 18 months ago, maybe 2 years ago, that should have been a reasonably timed recruitment, but it ended up taking an inordinate amount of time because the only responses, by and large, probably 95% of all the responses were from men. And we couldn't understand why that was until I asked some outside advisors, some friends and people that are colleagues of mine, what their thoughts were. And they said, send us the job announcement and we'll take a look at it. And one of my friends took a look at it, and she called back and she said, who wrote this thing? And I said, well, here it is, and I told her who wrote it and who they were. And she said, that's the problem. Women answer differently than men do, and they answer differently to words that are placed in these job announcements. And that would explain why you're not getting a lot of women responses. And so we went back, we reconvened the team to try to restructure the job announcement so it reflected both men and women for inputs. And instantly we got a different set of applicants, one of whom we ended up hiring because she was the right person at the right time in the right place. And even though that recruitment took us an extra number of months to fill, it was the right one. And she now is doing just an incredible job for the citizens of San Diego and the taxpayers and our team. And I credit the input of friends and others out there whom I value the opinions of to helping us get over that hurdle. That's one example of just being sure of this concept of unconscious bias that might percolate up during a recruitment, so that you do get the right person for the right job at the right time and make things happier for tomorrow.
Thank you, Dan. Well, certainly unconscious bias is truly that. It's unconscious. It's not anything that is done on purpose. And we're looking to overcome that. And the other thing I want to re-emphasize that you spoke about was never underestimate the power of your network. As GFOA members, we have tremendous networks. And I know Lisa Marie and I, when we speak, will often say, never underestimate the power of your network. So it's important to reach out to your colleagues and ask their opinions and get their feedback. Dr. Kim, can you comment on recruiting for us for just a moment? What practices do you believe are best to utilize in creating and cultivating a diverse workplace?
Honestly, Lisa, between Lisa Marie and Dan, a lot has been covered. Yeah, actually, that's a lot of what I would have said. There's some emphasis in the field on the internal job market, but I know that can be different between industries. And by that, I mean, internal job postings, management training, recruiting from within. I know there's a lot of recruiting from within the industry and from within that particular office. So that tends to be advantageous, especially when you're dealing with offices like Dan's, where there is already diversity, a great number of thoughtful and intentional diversity. So you have a great candidate pool to draw from. Yeah, there are also, what do you call it, digitized ways of doing job postings, doing exactly what Dan did. He had the resources, the personal resources to reach out to And he was spot on with that, what's wrong with this job description? And there's, for example, and this is not a pitch because I've not used this system, but it's called Textio. And there are other similar products out there that put your job description through specifically designed algorithms. And if you don't have personal resources, that could be an outlet.
All right, thank you so much. So we're at the top of the hour and we have 3 questions left, and I'd like to make sure that we get our responses in for those and still have time to respond to questions from the audience. So Lisa Marie, back in 2012, you recognized that there was a need to create a local chapter in the San Diego region for women in public finance that includes employees of public agencies, consultants to public agencies like myself, as well as some sprinkling of retirees because they have so much knowledge. What advice can you give to staff members on professional growth and development?
Sure, especially since we're speaking to the women network at GFOA. I think it's critical for as women that as we pursue our careers, and some of us end up getting married and having children, we have a tendency to not have our career be our priority because it's so overwhelmingly juggling work and children and family. And that's why it's even more so critical to fit some time into building that network and building that community. And that was one of the emphases I had in creating the chapter of San Diego, because in this organization, we can now look after each other. We offer trainings, we offer development opportunities, and we can still grow our career. Because I will tell you, at 28 years in the business, there's no way that you're going to be, your employer at the time is never going to recognize all your talents or appreciate your talents. They hired you for a specific skill set, but if you want to pursue your career and get accolades in your career, you should be participating in other organizations, such as GFOA. I mean, I've been a member of the debt committee, the investment committee. I'm a past chair of the Black Caucus. I've also served on the nomination committee. And by serving on these committees and serving on the board of GFOA, as well as the board of Women in Public Finance, I had an opportunity to broaden my skill set. I had to speak more, obviously, in these board meetings and these committee meetings. You have to write certain work papers on debt and investments, and you may not ever have that opportunity in your workplace. And so it gives you an opportunity to shine and to build your skill set beyond what you do on a day-to-day work. And you get the benefit of meeting new people and building your community. I mean, I got to know Mia, I think, from GFOA. And then from GFOA, I was able to help build Women in Public Finance. And it does make work more fun as well.
Thank you. The rewards of being a member of Women in Public Finance, and I'm sure the Women in Public Finance Network through the GFOA are immeasurable. And so I really encourage women to participate, and to anyone to participate in these types of groups. So let's go ahead and forward on to one. Oh, yes.
And I think it's important not to just be a member of an organization, but to actively participate. Mm-hmm. You should strive to be on a committee. You should strive to be in the leadership of the committee. You should strive to be on the board at some point. You want to actively engage with the organization.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. And I'd like to talk about, if we could, the business case for diversity and equity and inclusion. And although we are public agencies, we are businesses as well. And so I'd like to direct this question to Dan initially, if I may. Dan, what kind of tangible benefits does a business or agency see when they hire diverse employees and put diversity and inclusion practices into focus?
Well, I think that it's far-reaching, actually. We talked a little bit before about better outcomes, better decisions, better decision-making process, inclusiveness, and bringing the team together on more things than ever before. It enables us as an agency to do the right thing for the constituents, in our case, the taxpayers of San Diego County. And we have now over 1,400,000 of them. And that is quite a huge number. We want to keep people happy. They're our customers. But at the same time, we have to uphold our goals and our objectives and hold our ground when it comes to outrageous requests. And that's, again, where the team comes in. Well-trained, it strengthens our customer service in essence. It enables the organization to attract the best talent, increases employee satisfaction and engagement, and leads to smarter decisions. So I think those are just a few of the things. The other sidebar too, and many universities in the region, as well as in the state of California, have opened up innovation labs and opened up an area where employees can actually contribute to doing things better through innovation. And we encourage that, and we pass along rewards even for people who come up with these great ideas that help us to create a better service organization. So there's got to be a little reward in there for people sometimes, and that we have found is very helpful. But ultimately, it leads to greater financial success. I talked in terms of 6 straight years of 99% collection rates. That doesn't happen just by accident. It happens because all the members of our team are pushing to do the right thing and get things done and get the bills paid. So that's what that's about as far as we're concerned.
Thank you, Dan. And Dr. Kim, in your experience and in conducting your research, what would you say the business case is for diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Again, Dan covered a lot of the benefits. The only thing I would add is some hard numbers. So Dan mentioned that their collection rate has been 99% over the years, which is fantastic. There's also evidence that the innovative mindset among employees is up to 6 times greater. So these are not just anecdotes. There's hard data to support these issues. Obviously, fewer discrimination lawsuits saves money, but if you consider that the average cost of lawsuits, then it changes your mindset a little bit. They can be anywhere from $200,000 to $6 million. In terms of retention and productivity, when there was a 2018 Gallup poll that said that lost productivity could average up to 1/3 of an employee's annual salary for every year they stay on. And this is from stress from if there's a pay inequity or perceived discrimination or actual discrimination. And turnover costs are also about 1/3 of a person's salary. And to Dan's last point about crisis management, this really makes us think that gender equity, diversity in general could actually be critical to our economic recovery from the pandemic recession.
Thank you for your comments. So we're going to hurry through and move along to our last poll question. I want to make sure that everyone gets their CPE credits. So would you say that diversity, equity, and inclusion are valued within your agency? Either yes, no, in progress, or unsure. And we'll take about 30 seconds to respond to that question. Wow, and overwhelmingly 66% said yes, that diversity, equity, and inclusion is valued within your agency. And I think that's fantastic. A small 4% said no, so there is still work that needs to be done. 27% are in progress, and a similar 4% are unsure. So within public agencies, it looks like the good work is being done, but there is still some work to be done. So let's go ahead and turn to the last and final slide. I want to make sure that we leave at least 10 minutes for some Q&A afterward with the panelists. So Dr. Kim, what can we take away from today's D&I discussion?
I would say that it takes awareness and intention by all stakeholders in a community to transform our gender culture. This is an absolute imperative, socially and economically. And the government, as we saw just from our small sampling of panelists today, can and do lead the way by example and influence.
Thank you. Lisa Marie Harris, will you share a takeaway from today's D&I discussion with our participants?
Sure, I'm always reminded of a speaker, Verna Myers, from the Women in Public Finance Conference a couple of years ago. She was the keynote D&I speaker, and her comments were, diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. And so really, what does that mean? That means for me that when I have a meeting or we have initiative, I want my employees to not just be invited. I want them to actively participate. I want them to bring their authentic self so that we can create innovation, so that we can solve very challenging problems. And during this pandemic, we're going to be faced with many, many problems. And we need to bring our authentic best self to work so that we can solve them. So I'd like to have all my employees dancing.
Thank you. That's really powerful. And Dan, from you, will you give us a final thought or takeaway from today's D&I discussion?
Well, if I add up the numbers correctly, 75% and 12%, for instance, i.e. those who really believe in a pathway that follows diversity and equity as a base, a foundation for their efforts. And then you add in we're thinking about it and we're close there, 12%. That's 87% of all participants today. And I think that is something that everyone should be proud of. But I think the work still needs to be done. There is always going to be more work needed. But in these cases that we have talked about today, we can't let down. We can't let our guard down and revert to old ways of doing things. We must embrace new ways of working together and creating a harmonious work environment that is replete with diversity and equity throughout. And I know, as I alluded to earlier, that San Diego County has made great strides in this effort, and they will continue to build on those because the management of the county is dedicated to creating an environment that's good and helpful for all. So I would encourage every one of our viewers today to actually give some deep thought to what has been said here. And if you need help, and you need information on how to get things started where you are, I think any one of us on the panel, any one of us here today would be most happy to speak with you.
Thank you, Dan. That's wonderful that you're making yourselves and the panelists available. We have a lot of knowledge on this topic and would be happy to share with the GFOA membership. So in closing, I'd like to read a quote, if I may, and then we're going to open it up. We'll have about 10 minutes left for Q&A. So as I was preparing for this, I saw this quote, and it said, "When I see you through my eyes, I know we are different. But when I see you through my heart, I know we are the same." And that was written by Zoe Zantamata. So thank you all for joining us today. And it looks like we have quite a few questions coming in. So I will go ahead and ask the first question in the queue. Can Ms. Harris share an example of a slide used to learn about each other?
I think they want me to actually share the slide, so I'll send it, the presentation to Elizabeth, and I'd be happy to have that presentation shared to all the participants. It was really a nice, it is only 5 or 6 slides, but each staff really took a time to highlight key points about their culture. And in fact, they also encouraged when we get back into the office, we're going to learn each person's language and be able to say good morning. So that's a challenge for me.
That's incredible. Wow.
Yeah.
Any recommendations on how to handle a new leader who is moving backwards as far as inclusion goes?
Fire them. I
Okay.
think that it depends on the circumstances, actually, in my view. I think we all need to be tolerant of people. We all need to kind of come together now after we've had this huge, huge extended debate over who's right, who's wrong, who should be in office, who shouldn't be. We need to bring people back together again. So I would look for commonalities. I would look for opportunities, and even find out who his or her peers are, or people that he might rely on for input on certain things, because this is not a secret. There's no secret formula here. It's something that, as I said at the outset, you need to figure it out by feeling it strongly in your heart that it's the right thing to do, and then you need to figure out in your mind as how to go about it and get it done. Like Cable Guy says, get her done.
Thank you, Dan.
And
So
somebody always, I mean, everybody always answers to somebody in one way or another. So if there is, as Dan was alluding to, if there is an opportunity to speak to somebody that does influence this person, whether it's a superior or a peer, you know, this kind of destructive behavior is going to show up in the productivity and the retention of the employees. So if there's a way even just to look at the data to prove the point, that can also be very helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. We have another question that I believe may lead to another session that is in the works currently. It says that recent New York Times article indicated that women have had more severe negative impact during the pandemic. How do we help these women come back to work? Dr. Kim, I think this is in your wheelhouse, but my understanding is also that there will be a session planned in the near future that the Women Public Finance Network will be sharing with the GFOA. But if you'd like to comment on that, Dr. Kim, please do so.
Sure. Given that there's another session coming, I'll be very broad. There are several issues that come to the forefront, the main one being caregiving. So as a society, if we are able to open our eyes to the sheer amount of unpaid work that women are doing at home with their families, within their communities, personal communities, that is a huge step toward equalizing their ability to contribute to the workplace. And that comes from men sharing or other household members sharing the caregiving responsibilities. There's also the message that comes from the employer's side of understanding that, indicating that the employer is aware that this is going on, and understanding, at least to some degree, what the challenges are, and having that dialogue of how can we help? How can we make things easier for you? And really reinforcing the message that we value you. We want this to work for both of us.
I would add, if I could, that, you know, and I will speak from my own personal experience, that this is not just one gender issue as a result of the pandemic. I remember when I first started to telecommute from my home on a regular basis last March, the loneliness, the isolation, the depression, and the quietness of this existence was deafening. I mean, it was really something that took me a while to adjust to. And not to mention the camaraderie and just seeing people in the hallways at work, but not seeing them anymore, not seeing them. Those were things we depend on as employees, wherever we work. And when you take those out, you're pulling more than one chair at a time out from the circle of you better sit down or you lose a chair, because the chairs aren't there to support you. It's pretty ominous. And my side is to empathize with what you brought up here. This is a great topic, and it's something that affects all of our employees, particularly those who are commuting now from home to do their chores rather than from the office after work to do their chores, but still getting the work done. I'm just pleasantly surprised to see how effective and efficient our workforce is working off-site. Very impressive.
Yeah. That also gets to being allowing men to express themselves in the way that Dan has just done so, to have feelings and not always have to be the stoic, the emotionless, the just getting the job done and nothing else matters kind of attitude that is an set of expectations that is thankfully shifting.
Yes. Thank you. So we have 5 minutes left, maybe time, Elizabeth, for 1 or 2 more questions. Are you okay with that? We have time for 1 more question. And this sort of strikes me as interesting because Dan and I had this conversation several months back about some training that was being conducted in the late 60s and early 70s during the civil rights movement. But the question is, given the current hyper-polarized political climate, is maintaining diversity in danger of being obsolete or being scrapped?
It's always in danger of being obsolete or being scrapped. That I would say that it is important, this was mentioned before, it is important to be vigilant. It is important to keep your eye on the prize. And from the data side, it's also very important to track a consistent set of data so we can, so we don't have to rely on anecdotal evidence that things are getting better. Sure, they're better than they used to be. Women can vote, for example. But if we can be consistent and insist on that consistency, then we'll know what are the barriers that women of color are facing, and what are their daily experiences, and how is family leave being treated and implemented, and take those data points and follow them over the long term. Then there are no excuses. It's in black and white, and we can tell, are we making progress, are we not? And if we're not, it becomes much easier to address those issues specifically.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. And my thought and feeling is that based on the protests that occurred over the summer, that there is an outcry for additional conversations and training from people, from individuals, and from communities across the country. So with that, I think we've answered our last and final question. Elizabeth, we'll turn the panel back over to you.
Thank you, Mia. Thank you, Lisa Marie, Dan, and Hei-ock. Great conversation today. So I thank you for your time and your thoughts. Everyone, I would like to turn your attention to the slide. In the teal box, you can see the CPE verification code, conversation. So after the program is complete, please return to the course landing page in GFOA's Learning Management System. You will see a verification component for this class. In that box to the right, you will enter the word conversation, all in lowercase, and hit the submit button. Once you do and you type it in correctly, it will unlock and award you your CPE credit. For those of you viewing in a group setting, our learning management system is a user-based product, so everyone who is an attendee will need to log in under their own credentials and complete the attendance verification using the code conversation. Additionally, I want to draw your attention to the upcoming GFOA WPFN events. Please keep in mind for our virtual networking event in December. Hope you're able to attend and kind of build that network that Lisa Marie and Mia talked about that's so important to the conversation. Thank you for participating in today's session. Please close out of the video and return to the learning management system where you will find the session evaluation. Please take a moment now to complete the evaluation and give us your feedback on the program. You'll also find an area to enter the CPE verification code conversation to unlock your CPE credits. Thank you for joining us and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So Elizabeth, I'll send you that PowerPoint slide presentation about the cultural presentation that my department did, and you can send it out.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa Marie. I appreciate it.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Best of luck today.
Thank you all. And
Thank
thank you,
you, Dan.
Elizabeth. Yeah.
Take
Take care.
care now.